My name is Crystal Sanchez. I'm one of the training and development specialists here at ISAC. On this call with me is also my colleague, Nicole Boyd, presenting on the second half of this presentation. Today, we'll be talking about understanding and supporting first-gen students. Before we start, I did want to go over some housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be shared on our isac.org/pd/on-demand webinars webpage. If you are having trouble connecting audio through your computer, you can use the Call Me option for audio. So if you see my lips moving, but you're not hearing any audio coming out, you can go ahead and try that Call Me option for getting that audio. Please use the Q&A feature if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation. It is a little question mark box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And then you can view any upcoming webinars that we have at our isac.org/pd/webinars webpage. And there are continuing education and professional development hours available for this webinar. We'll go ahead and get started. So just a little bit more about ISAC. For those who are unfamiliar, our mission here is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. We administer scholarship and grant programs to students across the state of Illinois. Most commonly, people know us for the MAP grant program. It is one of our bigger grant programs that we have here at ISAC. Here at the professional development side, we do have offerings on navigating the financial aid process, resources and support for underrepresented students, such as first-gen students, obviously, and understanding student loan repayment and forgiveness programs. So our agenda for today, we're going to start by defining what is a first-generation student, what are some challenges that they face, and then I will hand it off to Nicole, who'll be talking more about supporting first-generation students and some resources to help guide them. So just to start off, I want to start off by defining first-generation students. So these are students whose parents did not complete a post-secondary education. It doesn't always mean they are the first in their family to go to college. When I was working in the ISAC Corps, a lot of times I would hear students say, but my older sister went to college before me, but my parents didn't go, and therefore I'm not first generation, which is not the case. The siblings would have all been first generation. If they're in that same generation, they're the first generation in their family to go to college. It doesn't matter if they're the first sibling to go to college, the second, the third, they would all be considered first generation if their parents did not complete a post-secondary degree. This is a very common misconception among students that to be first generation, they have to be their first in their family to go to college, when they simply have to be the first generation in their family to go to college. Now, this definition can vary by source, so different institutions, different agencies will all define first gen differently. So, for example, the U.S. Department of Education defines a first gen student as a student whose parents did not complete a 4-year degree or that bachelor's degree program. We here at ISAC define it as a student whose parents did not obtain a post-secondary degree. I have seen other definitions where they include students whose parents maybe got a 4-year degree or got a post-secondary degree, but they got it outside of the U.S. I have seen some institutions add that as well as part of that definition, simply because the school system here is so entirely different from what you can find in another country. I know my dad always used to make the joke that back in his country, it only costed $500 to go all 4 years for school. And as we know, that is very rarely the case out here. But in different organizations and different institutions can have different definitions for first-gen students. So if a student is curious, they can always reach out to their institution and ask, how do they define first-gen students? Now just talking a little bit more about the first-gen student population. So across the states, 1 in 3 undergraduate students are first generation. So that's about 5 million students. 31% are under the age of 23. And 57% are actually over the age of 24. In Illinois specifically, about 184,000 first-generation students are enrolled in college here in Illinois, and 4 out of 10 are enrolled in a community college. Now, these statistics are a little bit outdated. They're a couple years older, but they are still giving a good picture of what the first-generation student population looks like at a national level and at the state level, there is a lot of first generation students in the higher education system. So now we're going to have my colleague Nicole open up the chat. We did want to make this presentation a little bit more interactive for you all. So I am curious to know if any of you all are first generation students or you know someone who is. And if this is the case, consider the following. How did it feel to navigate the college going process? Did you know you were first generation? How or when did you find out you were first generation? And how can we continue to build an inclusive environment in our schools and community-based organizations to help support first-gen students in their post-secondary and career plans? So feel free to drop your answers in the chat. I would love to hear from you all in terms of your experiences yourselves as first-generation students, or if you know someone who is first-generation students, we'd love to hear from you all. We definitely want to hear more about you all's experiences with first-generation student and student experiences. So we'll give you all a couple minutes to drop it in the chat if you feel comfortable about first generation students and their stories. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming in the chat. Awesome. So amazing, you guys. I'm seeing a lot of common threads throughout. Awesome. We have a lot of first gen students on here. That is awesome. And I'm seeing a lot of commonalities with difficulties with the first generation students having difficulties with the financial aid process. That can definitely be a challenging aspect. Let's see. Navigating the college selection process, I'm also seeing on here, seems to be a common thread. Loving the participation, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your guys' personal experiences. We learn from you all as much as you all learn from us. So this is awesome. Okay, so some people saying they had counselors or other people in their lives who helped guided them through the process. That's awesome. We're having a mix between people finding out early on and people finding out during the process. Interesting. Thank you all so much for sharing. I really appreciate everybody's participation. I definitely think it's helpful for us to see everybody else's stories and for us to see it. I personally love hearing people's stories, especially when it comes to navigating the college going experience. So I thank you all for sharing. And I'm going to keep moving on for the sake of time, but I appreciate all of you all's responses. Yeah, I'm seeing language is a big one. That seems to be a big barrier. And we'll talk about a lot of these barriers that you all are mentioning and ways we can support students through these barriers. So without further ado, we're going to start talking about just a little bit more of the racial differences among first generation students. We have seen that educational gains associated with having a college educated parent are widespread. There is a percentage of adults who have completed at least a bachelor's degree among those with. So on the right hand side, you're seeing kind of the breakdown of the percentage of adults who have completed at least a bachelor's degree among those with parents without a post-secondary degree versus parents with at least one parent with a post-secondary degree. So if you look at that first box up at the top with the parents without a post-secondary degree, we are seeing that the percentage of adults who are completing that bachelor's degree program, it's 29% of them for white students, 21% for black students, and 15% of Hispanic students are completing that bachelor's degree program when they have a parent without a post-secondary degree, meaning they are a first-generation college student. And if we compare those numbers to when a student has at least one parent with a post-secondary degree, we see a huge gap in between. We can see that 72% of white students are able to complete that bachelor's degree. 57% of black students are able to complete that bachelor's, and 58% of Hispanic students are able to complete that bachelor's with at least one parent with a post-secondary degree. So as we can see on this chart, it makes a huge difference to have somebody who has gone through the process supporting them. It is a big gap, as we can see. As first generation students oftentimes are having struggles, not just getting to college, but also making it through to that full completion of that bachelor's degree program. And this is definitely something we want to be aware of so we know how to better help our students prepare for not just going to college, but making it through all the way, especially for our first gen students who may not have any other role models we commonly saw, in the chat, who may not have had that support in navigating that process, making sure that we're being able to provide that support for them so they can not only get to college, but also work all the way through to completing their bachelor's degree. And we'll talk more about those supports in the second half of this presentation. So some challenges facing first generation students. So you all actually mentioned a lot of these in the chat, which is great. I love hearing the firsthand experiences that you all have with these challenges. Some of these challenges are unique to first generation students, but others are going to be applicable to a lot of other student populations. And we all know that first generation students especially experience a lot of numerous challenges, and we'll be diving deeper into these different challenges. And I know many of you have commented on a lot of these. So we'll be talking about the parental support and maybe lack of being a barrier to post-secondary education, that navigating the higher education process. So I saw in a lot of you all stories that you shared, this was a big barrier, was having to navigate that higher education process that can also be complicated. A couple of you mentioned that language piece, the language of the terms you're hearing when you're trying to navigate this process can oftentimes be difficult to comprehend. Paying for college, that was another common thread that you all shared, and this is one that I saw a lot, especially working as an ISAC core member, was that there was a big barrier of that paying for college piece. And then we'll get into the mental health aspect, that sense of belonging, and other responsibilities that the student may have outside of post-secondary education. So we're going to start off with that parental support piece. So parents may try to support their students, but they may be unfamiliar with the college going process. This is a really common thread that I've seen a lot, especially working out in the field, where I've had parents often ask me, how do I help my students? I've never done this. I've never gone to college, or I've never gone to college in this country. What do I do? How do I do it? How do I support my student? A lot of times these parents are willing to help. They want to help their student succeed. They simply don't have that information, or maybe don't know where to find the knowledge to help their student. And they simply just being unfamiliar can also be a struggle for many parents. Oftentimes the parents would come to me confused, maybe frustrated that they can't help the student as much as they want. So remembering that oftentimes that having parents who maybe need a little bit more knowledge on the system can make a huge difference in making sure parents are being educated as much as the students. College also may not be seen as a priority. There may be other competing priorities that the student may have to face, especially with the parents. Maybe they have to work to help to support their family. Maybe, they have a one parent household. They need that help. I saw that a lot with a lot of my students, that they needed to work to help pay for groceries or food or their water bills. So sometimes college may not be seen as the priority so much as getting to the workforce, for example. And also financial implications may prevent parents from providing support. maybe the parents just don't have enough money. Maybe they have a lot of mouths to feed. And, we know that times are tough, and it may just be that the parent doesn't have any funding, any financial support that they could possibly give to that student. So that may be difficult for the student if they have, they're lacking that financial support from their parents. It may just be that circumstances simply prevent the parent from being able to provide that financial support to the student to go to college. And finally, cultural barriers also arise, especially when students are leaving home. I know this can be a really big thing, especially if students are going long away from home. So I am a Latina, and I know my parents were quite upset when my sister decided that she was going to go 6 hours away to college. It was a huge battle in our household because my parents culturally did not believe that my sister should be going so far away from home alone. That's just something that can be a potential barrier with parents and cultural barriers, maybe not wanting the students to leave home or leave so far away from home. Her going 6 hours away made me going 3 hours away a little bit more palatable to them. But that is something that can be a barrier for a lot of students and having to overcome that cultural barrier to be able to go off to college, especially if they are going maybe several hours or even states away. Now we'll talk about that navigating the higher ed process. So this was one that was mentioned a lot in you all's stories. There is that lack of access to information about that college going process. Oftentimes students don't know where to access this information. Maybe that information is simply not available to them. This can be a really big challenge for them if they don't know where to go, who to look to, who to talk to, what to do. They are also often less likely to enroll in selective colleges. So 31% of first-gen students apply to institutions with open or rolling admissions. Many times I've seen with my own students, this comes down to feeling like they can't make it to a selective college. They've never seen anybody like them make it to a selective college. A lot of my students struggled with the application process as it was, and they felt that trying to go for a selective college would just be too daunting, too tedious. So these are things can be a real struggle with students, especially if they're just learning, what are the next steps to take? What do these languages mean? And we'll be providing a lot of resources to you all at the end of this presentation to help give to your students to hopefully help support them through this process. And finally, they may just be unaware of the different support options available at colleges and universities designed for first gen students. There's a lot of colleges and universities, especially here in the state of Illinois, who have first generation programs just for first gen students. For example, one of our former colleagues used to go to North Central College, and he was part of the Cardinal First program at North Central College. And that's just one example of many across the state and across the nation of colleges and universities designing these first gen programs for students to help support them throughout their journey in their selected college or university. But a lot of times, students just don't know that this is actually a form of support that they can look for on their college campus. Now, I'm going to talk about the biggest barrier. We all know this is one of the primary barriers and concerns for first generation student is that paying for college option. We know that college is quite expensive and students are often unaware of financial aid available. Many times, my first generation students did not even know what financial aid was. They didn't know that financial aid could actually mean grants and scholarships, which are free to students. Many of my first gen students were under the impression that financial aid meant loans. So that was sometimes a barrier for students, just not knowing what financial aid is available. Many of them had never heard of the Pell Grant, had never heard of the MAP Grant. And as you know, those can give quite a bit of money to students to help them pay for college. So that is something that can be a barrier to students. Parents may be reluctant for various reasons to share information necessary to complete financial aid applications. For some examples, I've seen parents reluctant to share their tax documents, their income information. I've heard for some parents that they just have a distrust of the government. They don't really want to be sharing their tax information. I've heard from other parents that they didn't want their student seeing their income. They didn't want the student to know how much they made. Sometimes they were under the impression that their other spouse or maybe their former spouse was going to be able to see their income and they didn't want that information to be shared. So there's a lot of different reasons that I heard out in the field as an ISAC core member, and I'm sure Nicole has as well in her own experience of parents just being really reluctant to provide that information. And without that information, it makes it really difficult to complete those financial aid applications and potentially get the students some funding to help them pay for college. And they're also more likely to incur debt for their education. So many times, again, going with that lack of information of the financial aid process, oftentimes they do tend to incur debt. I had a colleague of mine who said he was first generation. He took out some private loans and he's left in thousands of dollars in debts because he was told that these private loans were easy, affordable option, not knowing that grant programs and other things were an option. And this is just one example of many that students can be facing in getting potentially more debt than they potentially need for their education. Now, if we're looking at the paying for college for federal aid, so what are students receiving? We are seeing that first generation students are receiving a lot of federal aid. So they're getting approximately about 63% of first generation students are getting some sort of Title IX funding. And we can see that for the continuing education students, are getting about 52%. The one in blue is representative first generation students. The bars in gray are representing continuing generation. So there may be second generation, third generation. We do see that for the Pell Grant, first generation students are getting more Pell Grant than our continuing generation students. So again, that funding is out there for students. They are qualifying to get these grant programs. They simply have to know to apply. And then we are seeing for federal student loans that students are getting slightly less. First generation students are getting slightly less loans than their continuing generation counterparts. So, and this is data that we've seen. This data started in about 2019 with some updates in 2025. But this is kind of the trends we're seeing in students and their getting of federal student aid. Now, when we talk about mental health, I think this is one of the most important topics when we are working with first generation students because first generation students experience many emotions before, during, and after their post secondary experience. So, one of the most common is the breakaway guilt. So, a lot of them feel guilty for leaving their family and loved ones behind. They may have other responsibilities at home. Maybe they're their family's translator, their family's driver, their family's caretaker. Oftentimes, it can come with a sense of guilt that if they're leaving home far away, especially, or even just for a few hours, it feels a lot of guilt, especially with that having access to other opportunities that maybe their siblings didn't get, or maybe their parents were not able to get. Oftentimes, this guilt can really weigh on a lot of first generation students. Kind of going hand in hand with that homesickness. I'm sure many of you all, I know I experienced homesickness when I went to college, and I'm sure many of you all did as well. This is potentially the first time that these students have been far away from home or their family for an extended period of time. And that can be really hard for students, especially if they've never been away from home, to have that distance in between them or that time in between getting to see them. So, this can often be a really big challenge for students. And both that breakaway guilt and homesickness can all lead to depression and or anxiety. These students are often in a new environment and they may not have their support system that they're used to having at home, kind of going hand in hand with that. Maybe this being their first time being away from home, being away from their support network. It may be challenging for them to adjust to their new environment, to find a new support system, a new support network on their campus. This can often lead to social isolation. So many students just maybe don't feel like going out. They maybe don't feel like socializing with other students. They may just be keeping to themselves, just doing their work. And this is something that a lot of first generation students and students in general can experience when they are going to college. And often this can result in an impact on their grades, which can impact eligibility for aid. In order to maintain their aid for that federal aid, they do have to be making satisfactory academic progress, which means they have to be passing their classes, they have to be demonstrating they are making progress towards that degree completion. If a student is not able to demonstrate they're making this progress, many times they may lose that federal funding if they're not showing that. And we absolutely don't want this to happen for our students. And this is something really important. It is a topic that is very important that we're aware of and we're talking about, especially with our first generation students. Going hand in hand with that mental health piece, we do have that sense of belonging. So many first generation students may experience imposter syndrome. So they may feel like they don't belong. They may question or second guess their abilities. So they may feel like, I don't belong here. I don't know what I'm doing here. Maybe I'm not good enough to be here. And all these kind of thoughts can lead to depression and anxiety as well. And many first gen students may not know anyone else on their campus. They may not know how to build a community or network on campus. So they may not know, where do I start? Who do I ask? Where do I go? And they may not know again that resources and support services exist or how to even find them. And Nicole will be talking a lot more about different tools we have both here at ISAC and outside of ISAC to help students mitigate some of these questions, some of these concerns of not knowing how to build a community, not knowing about resources. So we'll be talking more about resources and support for students in just a little bit. And then finally, other responsibilities. So oftentimes students may be hesitant to enroll or go away for school because they are the support system for their younger siblings. Maybe they're their younger siblings' caretakers. They're the ones who take care of them when they come home after school. And or their parents. Maybe their parents aren't able to work or are not able to go out. So they are the ones supporting the family. They are the ones working. They are the ones providing for their family. I saw this a lot several times in the field when I was working with students, is that they were the primary breadwinner or caretaker for their siblings or for their parents. It can often make it really difficult for them to decide to go away to school when they feel like they have so many responsibilities back home. Financials, again, they may need to work to help with their own expenses or family finances. They may be all on their own. They may be needing to work to fill in the gap for food, to help pay for clothing, to help pay for housing. And also academics can also be a big factor in that. Balancing school commitments, especially if you're like me and you have a tendency to overcommit. When I was in college, I was trying to do it all, getting those internships, volunteering, all kinds of stuff. But oftentimes, this can be really difficult to balance all the different commitments that they have at school. And again, these are things that all can be a barrier to a student not only enrolling in college, but making it through all the way to that degree completion. And now there's some additional barriers. I always like to remind everybody that just the financial aid is important, going to college is important, but for many of our students, they have some barriers of getting their basic needs met. Students who are experiencing homelessness or in DCFS care are more likely to experience housing or food insecurities than their peers. So this is something that can be a big barrier to many students. Medical care can also be a big barrier, so they may not be aware that their university offers health insurance. Many universities do offer health insurance, so they may simply be unaware of that at the moment. And for students who are new to that area, they may be unaware of what healthcare systems they have access to. So again, students just aren't aware of the medical care that they have access to, the insurance they may have access to, and this can be a big barrier for some students. And that students may not have adequate childcare. So this can lead to missing classes or withdrawing from classes because they do not have support to attend school. I worked with a lot of students who were, teen moms, and for them it was really difficult for a lot of them to find childcare for somebody to watch their children so they could go to school. And oftentimes this led to their missing classes, or they're simply withdrawing from class, or simply not going to college in and of itself. So these barriers are also important to recognize that many students may be facing barriers beyond financial aid, beyond going to college. They may have some barriers in terms of some of those basic needs that they need met. So now I'm going to hand it off to Nicole, who will be talking more about supporting first-gen students through best practices.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. And just as a reminder, if you guys do have any questions during the presentation, we encourage you to use that Q&A feature to ask them. Okay, so kicking it off with best practices. The first one that I want to highlight is moving away from stereotypes, even those that seem well-intentioned or maybe even seem like positive stereotypes. So I know that we did just spend a good amount of time talking about the challenges that first generation students face and the obstacles that they may be overcoming. And that can lead to the development of this overachiever resilient narrative, which sounds like a great thing, right? Like highlighting students' resiliency. But in reality, no student wants to be put in a box. And it's also really important that we don't project our own narratives onto students. So just as an overall rule, moving away from stereotypes and avoiding putting any students on a pedestal. Next is when connecting students with resources or programs, either on or off campus, trying to build partnerships with these organizations so that ideally you can connect students with a person, not just a program. So being able to actually connect them with a real human name and adding that human element helps the student to feel a lot more individually cared for than just saying, oh, here's the name of this program for you to check out. So going beyond familiarizing yourself with the programs that are available, but actually working to build relationships with the people within those programs to connect your students. And then finally, another thing that you can do is to just identify which institutional scholarships are available specifically for first generation students. Particularly if you have a four-year institution near you that a lot of your students end up going to, or of course your local community college, you can just do a little bit of research and find if there are any institutional scholarships available for first-gen students, and then that can be a financial resource for you to connect your students to. And so now here are some ways that high schools are helping first-gen students. The first is the creation of first-gen student clubs. So these are student-run clubs geared towards helping first-gen students succeed to and through the college-going process. We say to and through because, of course, it's great to see first-gen students apply and start college, but we want to see them get all the way through and obtain that degree. So the benefit of these student clubs is that it helps them to form a peer network. So when they do start college and they may be struggling with certain things or have certain questions, they have that network from high school that they can refer back to and maybe ask questions or share any struggles if they are going through them. Or of course, if there is a teacher helping to lead that student club, that could be another resource for them for an adult to ask their questions to. This next piece is super important, and that is parent programming. So including parents in the conversation is essential. At this point in the student's life, the parent still holds a lot of weight in the decision that they ultimately make. So parent-specific programming can help parents understand the process of applying and going to college. Like Crystal mentioned, there are a lot of parents who did not go to college themselves who may absolutely want to support their student in going to college, but they just don't know how. So maybe that parent programming can include providing information to the parents, or it could be that the parent, having not gone to college themselves, maybe they have a lot of misconceptions about what college is. If we think about some of the media that's out there and what we see in the movies, there's a lot of stuff out there that if the parent didn't go to college themselves, they may be a little bit hesitant about their kid going away, especially if we consider some of those cultural components that Crystal mentioned. So including the parent in the conversation and having them be part of the decision is huge. And then finally is the idea of targeted supports. So of course we understand that you only have so many hours in a day and so many resources to go around. But if possible, the idea here is that you can work to support those students who may or may not be thinking about going to college. They're absolutely smart enough to go to college, but as to whether or not they actually will, they may be kind of on the fence. I'm sure you are already thinking of some of those students that you know right now. So if you have the time and the resources available, making a little bit more of an effort with these students to have some conversations about maybe some barriers that they're facing that they haven't talked about, or trying to figure out supports that they need, or again, talking about misconceptions or things that make them hesitant about going to college. And then there are ways that universities are helping at their level as well. In Illinois, several schools across the state are designated as what's called first gen forward schools. So they are dedicated to helping first-gen students build a community and have supports as they transition and persist through school and more. So that transition phase can be really, really difficult for first-gen students. So some of these institutions have organizations for first-gen students. So just to name a few in Illinois, there's DePaul University, Eastern Illinois University, Governor State University, National Louis University, North Central College, Northern Illinois University, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, Southern Illinois University Carbondale, Southern Illinois University Edwardsville, and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And then there are ways that we at ISAC are helping as well. First to mention is our First Gen Symposium, where we have presentations and conversations just like the one that we're having today with other practitioners. The rest of these resources I will go into greater detail on later slides, but I do want to mention them briefly here. The first is the ISAC student portal, which I like to refer to as a one-stop shop for all things financial aid. So I don't even think I could sit here and mention all of the resources there off the top of my head. There are a ton, and we will get into that later. Next is the ISAC Core. The ISAC Core are our near-peer mentors who are assigned to community college districts, and then they work with the high schools in their local communities. Next, we have the First Gen Scholars Network. We refer to that as FGSN for short, and that is a free resource for First Gen students. We also have the First Up podcast if you prefer listening to a podcast. So our colleagues, Brian and Jasmine, who are first gen students, or were first gen students, I should say, talk about their experiences, and they even bring on other professionals in the field of education. Next, we have the ISAC Parent Series, which is a series on our YouTube channel of videos specifically designed for parents. So again, going back to the importance of involving parents in the conversation. And then finally, Crystal and I are super excited to announce for the very first time today our First Gen newsletter. So we have been working on this First Gen newsletter for the past couple of months, and we are super excited to go more into detail about that later. And then finally, there are ways that you can help as well, starting off with partnering with community organizations. So we talked about that briefly, the importance of building those relationships and making those connections for your students. Some other ways that you could do this is if you have, local businesses, you could talk with them and see if they could do some sort of job shadow opportunity, or if you do have a first gen student group, you could see if somebody wants to come and talk to your first gen student group. You might even be able to see if they're willing to do some kind of small scholarship for first gen students. Even if it's $50, that's a huge help. So just reaching outside of your school and seeing what resources are available in your community. The next is incorporating parent programming however possible. We've talked about the importance of that. So some schools will do kind of like an email campaign to parents, maybe having some after school opportunities, whatever that might look like in your community. Next is collaborating with colleges on that transition or handoff process. I'm not even first gen myself, but I know that the transition in those first couple of weeks and months into college were really difficult for me. So maybe talking to, if you do have a local four-year institution or your community college, talk to them about some gaps that they may be seeing in this transition process. And then, you can talk to your students, and if you start collaborating, you can work together and try to fill in those gaps to make that transition process a little bit smoother for students. Next, your expertise is a resource. So whatever that might look like for you, it could be presenting at conferences, but it could also just be sharing your resources out into your networks and with your students, or even just talking to other colleagues about the work that you are doing. So maybe you can spark some ideas for them as well. And then finally, your experience is a very valuable resource. So if you are first gen, I know we saw a lot of first gen experiences being talked about in the chat. That's really awesome. Those first gen stories are a very valuable resource to first gen students. But even if you aren't first gen yourself, you have a college experience. And so You might be one of the few adults that these students have around them that they can talk to about, what is the day-to-day life like in college? How do you register for classes? How do you do all these different things? Your experience is a very valuable resource. And so then I do want to go more into detail about those resources that I mentioned earlier. First is that ISAC student portal. So you can see just from this quick screen grab, there's a lot here. First is the college and scholarship search tools. So here you can search college profiles both nationally and specifically in the state of Illinois, and you can also search scholarship databases. Next, we have multiple financial aid tools. We have a financial aid game for students to get more financial aid knowledge in a little bit more of a fun format. We also have the MAP estimator, where students can determine their eligibility for the MAP grant. This is without them, doing the full FAFSA and all of that, just to get a quick estimate, which can help with planning ahead. And then there's a really great tool called the Financial Aid Comparison Worksheet. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with those financial aid offers and how confusing they can be, especially since they are not very standardized from school to school. So particularly for first-gen students who their parents haven't done this before, they may not know how to read those financial aid offers. They can use this online tool and it breaks it down piece by piece. So students can evaluate those questions like, does one school offer me more in subsidized loans versus unsubsidized loans? So it makes that piece much easier. Next, we have the link to our YouTube channel, where there's a lot of great stuff on there, but one thing that I really want to highlight is the ISAC College Minute. This is a series of videos that are 1 to 2 minutes long, and it's recent college grads talking about parts of the college process, like things like move-in weekend and things like that. So this is a really great resource for first-gen students and great for a high school attention span with those 1 to 2 minute videos. And then there are more tools and resources available for practitioners. So there's the Claim Your Future Kit. This is kind of like a money management budgeting game that you could play with a small group of students, and it walks them through a monthly budget, even taking into consideration things like student loans. So I even did Claim Your Future up for myself when I moved out on my own, because it's just a little bit more fun than a spreadsheet. And then we also have the Illinois CIS 360 career and job search tool. So all of that can be found on the student portal. And then if a student wants to go ahead and make an account within the student portal, there's a lot more resources that they would have access to. They can even check their MAP paid credit hours as they move throughout college. And then we have year-round help through our ISAC core members. Our ISAC core members are near-peer mentors that support students and families with things like post-secondary and career exploration, scholarship searches, and completion of those financial aid applications. So a lot of students think of our ISAC core members as the FAFSA people. It's not entirely wrong, but of course they offer a lot more services than just that. So to find your local ISAC core member, you can enter your zip code on the student portal, and it will pull up the ISAC core members that are assigned to your community college district. Or students and families can set up virtual appointments using ISAC booking. So they can set that up one of two ways. If they have worked with an ISAC core member before and they, connected with them, they're familiar with their situation, they can just search that ISAC core member's name and set up an appointment directly with them. Or they can put a date and time that works for them, and then if they prefer to meet in English or in Spanish, and it will just match them with the core member that's available at that time. So again, that is on the student portal. And then I know I mentioned this briefly earlier, the First Generation Scholars Network, we call this the FGSN for short. So if students are interested, they can just go ahead and click the Join Now button on the student portal. It's super easy. And then joining allows students to connect with an FGSN mentor. They can find an FGSN program on the campus of the college that they're attending, and even join check-in events with other first-generation students. So this goes back to helping them build that support system, particularly throughout that transition process into college, and it is a free service as well. And then the First Up podcast. So I will be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of podcasts, particularly educational podcasts, but I think Brian and Jasmine do a really great job of being entertaining and engaging while still getting really great information out there. They talk about their own experiences as former first-gen students, and then they also bring on a lot of professionals who have worked in different areas within the educational field. And so it's a really great resource if you want to listen to that. And you can find this pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts, so Apple, Spotify, Podbean. And then again, the ISAC Parent Series, which is a great resource to share with your parents. This is a playlist of YouTube videos made specifically for parents, and each video is available in English and in Spanish. So you can see that these are a little bit longer. Again, this is going to be a little bit more information dense because it's designed for parents. So things like overviews of the financial aid process, tips for preparing your seniors, and then supporting first generation college students. We also wanted to include resources beyond financial aid on our website. Obviously, financial aid is a very important piece of the puzzle, but it is just one piece of the puzzle. So we have a list of food banks, including food banks on college and university campuses to help college students who may be experiencing food insecurity. And we also have resources or links to resources for housing assistance because we do have programs available here in the state of Illinois for emergency and transitional housing for college students. So they would just go to that link, that's Student Resources Beyond Financial Aid, and there they can find links to resources for food, housing, medical care, and child and dependent care assistance. And then below that, they can find an expanded list of food pantries across the state of Illinois. And then I also want to highlight NASPA First Gen Forward. This was formerly known as the Center for First Generation Student Success. This is kind of like a learning community where you can find a variety of webinars and online learning courses that you can take at your own pace, all designed to help you in supporting your first gen students. And then I'm sure that many of you have heard of One Click College Admit at this point, so we did want to include some resources to help you navigate that as well through our One Click College Admit resources page. So in case you're not aware, One Click College Admit is the only state-administered direct admissions initiative in Illinois. It is free and it just speeds up that application process. So there are resources on there to help families navigate OCCA. There's a list of FAQs for juniors and a list of FAQs for seniors. There's a step-by-step guide. There's an informational webinar recording and downloadable materials available for counselors as well. And then that brings me to our first gen student newsletter. So we are super excited to name this the First Up Insights for Student Success newsletter for practitioners. The idea here is that there's going to be a variety of resources, but it will be updated frequently. So while you'll have a variety of resources in one place, it's intended to not be overwhelming and something that you can just kind of skim through quickly and then look more into depth into the various resources as you have time. This is also intended to be a multimedia experience. So if you prefer to read versus listen versus watch a video, we'll have all of those different options on there. So for example, our first edition will have for read, that is an article. So we included an article that talks about how institutions are supporting first gen college students by the creation of programs that include college life skills coaching, peer mentorship, and financial aid coaching. For watch, we included a video from the ISAC College Minute, where one of our ISAC core alums, who was also a first gen college graduate, talks about what motivated her to go to college. We also have this piece to help you start these conversations with your students with the concept of low risk and high risk questions. So low risk are those questions that you can kind of just casually throw out there. They should be kind of easier conversations to have with your students. So for this example, we have what about going to college excites you? That's pretty easy to work into a conversation. Whereas high risk, those are those conversations that you might have to read the room a little bit, but ideally helps you to open up a deeper conversation with your students. So for this first edition, we have, how do you think that going to college might change you? That might be a little bit of a scarier question for some students, but again, the idea is that it helps you to have those deeper conversations with them. For Listen, we included one of our first up episodes where Brian and Jasmine talk about those issues that we talked about a lot of them today. So imposter syndrome, balancing family responsibilities, financial and mental health struggles, and tips for how practitioners can better support first-gen students. We also included some resources for you as practitioners, but also to share with your students. So in this first edition, we're including a glossary of terms to know. I remember seeing in the chat that the language in higher education was really confusing for a lot of people. So this is basically a glossary of the jargon used in higher education. And then we will also be spotlighting different social media resources. There's a ton out there nowadays. So just for this first one, we are highlighting First Gen Empower, which is a nonprofit dedicated to helping first gen, low income, and immigrant students thrive in their college and career journeys. And then finally, we want to hear from you. So you all are the experts in working with your own students, and ideally we want to see this become more of a network where professionals are sharing their experience with one another. So we're calling this the nugget of wisdom. And the idea here is that you're just sharing a little blurb of advice that you think that other practitioners could benefit from hearing, or something you've learned. So just 1 to 2 sentences. The QR code is up there if you have something that you'd like to share, as well as the link to the survey. Just if you have something, again, 1 to 2 sentences, nothing long. This first one that we're using comes from an ISAC core alum who is also a first-gen college student. So he said, every student brings their own strengths and challenges to their educational journey. Meeting each student where they are can make all the difference. So if you have something like that you would like to share, we would love to hear it. So this is coming soon. We will follow up via email when the first edition becomes available on our website. And then we also wanted to highlight this opportunity coming up where you can become certified in financial aid. So we would just invite you to join us for our Spring 2026 Financial Aid Certification Series, where you will learn how to support students through the financial aid process. This is a virtual series that will consist of 5 sessions, so 1 each day, starting Monday, January 26th, and ending on Friday, January 30th. Participants who attend all 5 sessions and then score at least 80% on the post-series assessment will receive an ISAC-issued certificate. So again, we have the QR code up on the screen to register. And then we also wanted to highlight the Illinois Education and Career Success Network Annual Conference, which this year is being held on February 26th of 2026. This is the 13th annual conference themed Stronger Together, creating opportunity for every learner. This is an in-person 1-day conference that will be held at Moraine Valley Community College in Palos Hills, Illinois, for anyone who is interested in equitably increasing post-secondary attainment in Illinois. So again, the link is on the slide and the QR code is up on the screen. And then another opportunity that we wanted to mention is our fan events that ISAC helps to sponsor through the Family Action Network. So these are free and open to the public, and it is a high-quality speaker series on a variety of topics relevant to our work. If you're interested, you can visit the fan website to register. There's one coming up Thursday, January 22nd, about parenting anxiety, breaking the cycle of worry and raising resilient kids. So that is at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And then as a reminder, we have continuing education credits and professional development hours available for today's presentation. So my colleague Crystal will go ahead and drop that link in the chat. Please just provide your feedback for today's training by completing an evaluation. And to request those CE credits or PD hours, that evaluation must be submitted by 4:30 p.m. this Thursday, January 15th. Then, if you are requesting PD hours specifically, you must submit your Illinois Educator Identification Number. So that brings us to the end of today's presentations. We want to thank you all for your time and your interest in supporting first-generation students. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact the professional development team at isac.outreachtraining@illinois.gov. And then we also encourage you to sign up for ISAC's e-messaging service to receive the latest news and updates at www.isac.org/emessaging. Thank you.